Hello and welcome to Northgate Arinzo's and Reality's Coffee Break series. Today we're going to be discussing and taking a look at a technology which is built into Reality as standard called SQL-VIEW. Now in today's modern world of databases, your pick or Reality environment can no longer be considered an island of data. Now what do I really mean by that statement? Well, we have to be able to interoperate with other databases inside our environment. Now, whether that's on a business-to-business type capability or a business-to-client capability. One of the constant queries that we get as a provider of Reality is how can I make my Reality database share and update data with my Oracle financial system, for instance, or my payroll system based on SQL Server. And in fact, it could be any application based on a SQL-based environment which has an ODBC type capability. So you could put in there MySQL, for instance, and indeed Microsoft Access. So in order to use the SQL-VIEW capability to enable this sharing of data, the first thing we need to do is to create ourselves a DSN entry in our Windows server so that Reality can get to the ODBC database. So let's hop over to Control Panel and we'll take a look at how quickly we can do that. So here we are in Control Panel. So we're going to click on our Administrative Tools folder, and in here we're going to find something called Data Sources, and this is a utility we're going to use today to create that DSN entry. So you get the choice of whether it'll be a user DSN, a file DSN, or indeed a system DSN, and that just controls who has access to the DSN. So today we're going to be using a system DSN, and we're actually, for the purpose of this demo, going to be talking to an Access database. So we're going to click on Add. We're going to find our Microsoft Access driver. We're going to give ourselves a data source name. I'm going to call it MyZip for today's demo. And then we need to find the database we're actually going to be talking to. So we click Select. We drill down, find the folder that it's in, and simply double click on the database. And that's it. So now we just need to press OK a couple of times and we've created our data source. So before we hop into Reality and start to use that data source, let's just quickly show you the data inside Access we're going to be using today. So here we are in Access. So we need to open up our database we're going to be using today. Now to keep things really simple today, we've just created one table inside our database called zip. So if we look at that, what this is basically is a subset of the zip codes for the US address system. So our primary key is zip ID. We also have a state and city column. So now we've explored the data itself, let's drop into Reality and show how quickly we can start to consume and use that data. So hopefully you're familiar with this type of environment. This is Reality sat at TCL in the sysman account. So what we're going to do is use the command SQL-VIEW to actually create that file name, effectively accessing that data in that Access database in real time. So the command we're going to be using is SQL-VIEW. The first thing we're going to do is give it a Reality file name it's going to be known as in the Reality environment. So we're going to call it zip.codes. The next parameter is the name of our DSN entry we configured via Control Panel. Now remember, we called that MyZip. This is going to be followed by the table name within inside that database, which was called zip, followed by the primary key, which was zip ID, and then the two columns we were interested in, which was state and city. Now what's going to happen when we create this file called zip.codes, it's going to go off via that DSN entry MyZip. It's going to find the table's zip. It's then going to identify the primary key as zip ID, and incidentally that will be what's known as my item ID in the Reality environment, and state and city will be attributes 1 and 2 respectively. Now if I switch these around on the command line, then they would respectively be switched around with attributes in my file. So the first thing it's going to ask me to do is supply myself a user ID and a password. Now this is if the database we're going to make that connection to requires some sort of security validation. Now, for today's purposes, because we're using Access, we don't need to supply it that information. So we can simply just press return. Okay, now that's created my zip.codes file. In actual fact, that's just a pointer to my Access database and that zip table. So I can now list this file, zip.codes. What that's doing is it's going off, making that ODBC connection and accessing this data in real time. Now you'll also notice that as part of that list that I've automatically been given some column headings. And this is because when that SQL-VIEW was created, Reality took a look at those column definitions inside that ODBC compliant database and decided to create me some dictionary items based upon those column definitions. So I've already got zip ID, I've got state, and I've got city. So that's a simple listing. Now we can also update this data. So if we edit the file, and let's pick the top one, 10,000. Okay, so you can see that I can access this data still, and I can simply file it away. That would have caused an update to happen. So let's actually prove that that update will happen. So let's change the state to ZZ. Okay, that's really it from the Reality environment. So we've seen how to create the SQL-VIEW, and we've seen that we can read data from it and we can update data from it. Now the final bit is to prove to ourselves that we did actually update that data. So if we drop back into Access now and we'll just take a look at the zip column, the zip table, and we should see that the first record has a new state. So here we are back in our Access database looking at the zip table, and you can see that the state for the first record was indeed changed to ZZ. Now, just a couple more things to mention about SQL-VIEW. If I now delete the file, all I'm actually deleting is the pointer to that file. I'm not physically deleting any data out of it. Now also, if you're going to do a file save on this Reality database, it will save the pointer to it, but it won't save the data inside that database, as we rely on the other database's backup capabilities to do that for you. And that's SQL-VIEW. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on other coffee break series from Reality and Northgate Arinze.